Good? Okay. Hey guys, so welcome to the stream. I'm hoping this works. We had this big grand plan for how we were going to make this work using OBS, and it completely failed. Computer overheated, got to clean the thing out, and anyway, so we're going to run this straight from my phone, and hopefully the quality's good. I can't actually see the screen behind, so I'm going to be kind of back and forth a little bit, but we'll get it done. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do the first project for the casting course that I want to run. Sorry. There we go. That's better. Okay, so we're going to do the first project for the casting course that we're going to run, which is going to be a signet ring. In this case, we're going to go the extra step that I was going to have in the videos, and we're gonna, instead of just leaving it, you know, like a circle on top that you could engrave something into, we're gonna go so far as to cut it into the shape of a letter. I'm not sure which letter at this point, but I do have, you know, just a cutout of the alphabet, so I'll pick a letter and we'll put it on. I'm not sure, I'm not gonna make it for myself, so I sized my partner, who's a 6.5, and we'll carve it out from there. So let me just adjust the camera down to what we're going to work on, and then we'll get started. Yeah, I know, I'm getting there. There we go. A bit more down. Good. Okay. All right. So I have quite a few more tools than most of anyone doing this course will have. So I'm going to forego most of them. The only thing that I'm really using is this apron catch, which is just going to catch the wax that we carve away. I think I'm actually going to get rid of the bench pin because it's not part of the toolkit, so that can go. And we're just going to work on the table. There we go. For the most part, I'm going to be using all the tools that will be included in the kit, and we'll go from there. So I know I need to make this a 6.5, and this is very, very close to a 6. So I'm not going to have to do a whole lot of filing, but first we need to cut a chunk off of this piece of wax. So I just need to score it with something. This is an adjustable jeweler's saw frame with skip tooth teeth. You need to specify skip tooth because if you get the normal ones like this, these ones are designed for metal. They have a much higher tooth count, and the wax loads up inside them, and then they don't work very well. So let's actually draw. I'm going to use just a craft knife and score this out. This is just so I have an idea of what a straight line is going to be when I cut it. As you can see, I'm kind of struggling here on the table because I don't have the bench pin. The bench pin lifts the thing away from you so you have space to work, but like I said, I'm going to forego that luxury at the moment. And I'm just carving a line, making sure that everything is straight. There, just like that. Where's middle? And there's the middle. Okay. So I've carved a line, and now I'm going to cut all the way through it. There's actually two kinds of wax cutting blades, I should mention. As I said, these are skip tooth, but there's also one that's a spiral. And the spiral is, they cut way faster than this, but because it's a spiral, it cuts in all directions, which for someone coming new to waxwork is not the most controllable thing. Like, you need to have a little bit of practice using a saw first to get the hang of that. So I'm just kind of cutting from all sides, making sure that I'm staying straight. I think I went a little bit off, but that's not a big deal because we're going to file it down anyway. There we go. Yeah, so that was a bit of a rough cut, but no problem. For later, we'll use this guy. So this is called a vulcanite file. Just like the skip tooth on the saw, the teeth on this file are special. This one's kind of loaded up because I've been neglecting cleaning it out. But these ones are very good for filing wax as well. And there's a coarse side and a fine side, so you can kind of really hog off material, rounded or flat, and then switch it over and kind of smooth it out a bit. So I'm going to turn the piece as I work, and that's going to make sure that no particular area gets more filed down than the other. And I just want to make it roughly flat, not perfect. All of this wax, by the way, that we're going to carve away, we want to keep, because, I mean, normally if you were a jeweler, you'd probably just toss it in the garbage. But for this course, because we're building four different pieces, one of them is actually going to be additive wax work. So we'll get to using a lamp and a spatula. Actually, I have my lamp over here. My lamp needs a new wick, but a lamp and a spatula. And when we do, we're going to heat this up, and we'll melt the wax and build something. So this would be called additive wax work, and this would be called subtractive wax work. So we're taking away material, this one would be adding. And later on we can actually do both at the same time. Now again, I've got this apron thing here, so I'm just going to sweep this onto the apron so I have a clean workspace. But for course purposes, I would recommend having even just like a piece of paper or something underneath, so you can not make a tremendous mess and just easy clean up, you know, pour it away. So that seems pretty uniform. Actually, a little bit more on the top. That seems pretty good. The nice thing about filing, and this refers to like all metal work, whether or not you are doing wax or steel or silver or whatever, files are always, almost always, reliably flat. So if you just push, it will show you where high and low spots are. I noticed when I looked down at this, there was a little bit of a hump here and a curve in there. So I'm going to go back and just push the flat of the file over the top. What I'm looking at is just uniform lines across. If there's a dark spot from a different filing angle, then I know that that spot isn't being touched by the file, and I know that that's some place that needs a little bit of work. In this case, it's on a corner and an edge and the bottom, and I know all of those spots are just going to get filed away, so I'm not too worried about that. Same with this side. So there's a dark spot here and on the side, but again, that's just going to disappear. So. All right. So at this point, we could do one of two things. We could take one of these letters. I can cut this out. I'll use a little bit of clear packing tape and a pin, and then I'll poke the letters in, just so that it's set on the wax and we know what to follow. Or I could go towards turning this into a taper. You don't want to wear a ring that's like this. It'd be like a little brick. Well, maybe someone does, but I don't. Most people don't. So I'm going to cut this into a taper so that it fits nicer in the hand down here. I think we'll do that first. We're going to go back to the file for that, but I think I'll use the saw again. I'm just going to mark the angle. This is just going to be by eye, by the way. I don't have any exacting tools. Bearing in mind, again, that this is meant for a course. During the course, actually, I'm gonna have like a recommended tool list. So like a micrometer, for example, so you can gauge exact middles, or not gauge, you can get exact middles. You can mark everything properly. I think they're like, an extra $30 at Home Hardware or Canadian Tire or whatever. But they're not going to be part of the kit. Okay, so I've marked that taper approximately. Again, it doesn't have to be super perfect because with the file, we're going to be checking this constantly by eye. So now I'll try and mark the other side equally. That's really the trick here. I think I'm going to follow this line down. There we go, and then I have a place to aim for. There we go. Again, doesn't have to be flawless. So actually at this point I could decide to use the saw and just follow that line just the way I cut it. I think I might do that because then I'm going to be left with a chunk of wax rather than a pile of wax dust, which dust has its purpose sometimes, but a chunk is usually more useful. I'm also desperately trying not to cut my fingers. These blades they're sharp. I've been cut by them several times, but they're not designed to cut skin or anything. So more often than not, you'll slip and it'll just be like, ow, it's not gonna, or actually the real danger is when they break. And then it's like, you're coming down and it breaks and ping right into your skin and that hurts. This one though, this is, again, skip tooth, and they're thicker. One of the running jeweler jokes is if you need more than one wax blade, you're not doing things right, because you should only ever really need one. Like, the wax will never dull it. They're thicker. They don't break very often. So you get like a pack of a dozen, and it should last you a very, very, very long time. You're more likely to lose them than break them. So I'm taking this very slowly because I just want to carve away a little bit, and I want it all to be relatively accurate. I feel very out of practice. I have, if anyone hasn't watched our update video, we had to move in, when did we move? We moved in March, like pretty much at the height of the COVID everything, and we were supposed to be quarantined, but we had nowhere to quarantine. So we moved, and since then it's been a lot of unpacking and getting settled in, general trying to get back to life. So anyway, sorry, I digress. So I've cut off that one taper. I'm going to do the next one, but just before that, while I have a flat side, I'm going to file off this nub because I broke it rather than cut all the way through it. And just try to get this as flat as possible. So there's a pretty good example of like different planes. So this one has been dipped from my cut, not being flawless, and then those ones are still flat. So I'm going to try to bring, yeah, there's still plenty of extra. So try to bring that bottom one into this one rather than bring that one down, because this is our work surface where we're going to put the letter, so I don't want to file that as much. I'm incredibly tempted to throw my bench pin back on here and then include it in the kit. It's not bad. Alright, so there's the one chunk, which we can use later on. And now, do the other side. Bottom. Now I've just got to go through the top. I'm not too worried about my work surface. When I built these tables, I knew that they were going to get used and abused. But you know, if you're cutting like this with your saw blade straight down, maybe have like a cutting mat or something underneath for your nice dining room table or your counter or whatever, so you don't destroy it. There we go. That was a pretty bad cut, honestly. It's a bit at an angle. That's okay though. Something I should also mention is that carving wax comes in generally 3 different colors. Obviously I'm working with green. There's also blue and purple. I think there's a little bit of variation between the different brands, but that's kind of what people have settled into. Anyway, the colors serve to indicate different properties of the wax. So in this case, green is the hardest. It preserves the most detail. There's also purple and blue. Blue is the most flexible. and it also has the lowest melting temperature. Purple is like a combination of the two, so it has nice aspects of both. It's right in the middle, and then green is the hardest, and it has the highest melting temperature. The difference, though, is like, say you wanted to set a stone in this or something, you'd probably want to use blue, or at the very least, like, so this is an example here of blue wire. It's half round wire. This is something you'd use for like a bezel, so you can build this up around, you know, the edge or something like that, and this is thin enough that when you cast it, it'll just push over and become a bezel. We're not going to do that in this one, but you know, they all have their uses. So. In the end, they all cast identically. It doesn't matter which one. They're all the same. So this is a lot smaller on top than I wanted, so that's going to kind of limit what letter we can put on this. But then again, on this sheet, I did print the different font, like the same font, different size. So maybe we'll pick. It could be any one of the small ones, or maybe one of the larger ones, like a T. We'll get there. I still want to make this all flat and uniform before we get started, because if we don't start with a good base, it causes problems later on. So I know this has to be a 6.5. This is something that I'm not including in the jewelry kit because I kind of assume that you're going to be making the rings to fit yourself or loved ones. This will definitely be very high on the list of tools to get. This is a ring mandrel, and it's marked with all the different ring sizes. So I know I need to get to 6.5, and this is currently at about a 5. So now what I'm going to do is file the inside. And I'm going to take this very, very slowly because I don't want to file in like an oval shape or anything like that. And that's actually fixable later on. Oh, something else. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. If it does end up oval shaped, what I can do in the casting is, this is made out of steel, I can, after this is done in silver, I can hammer this back to round. But the trouble is that I can't guarantee that it will be an exact size. Like, it could go over slightly, it could be under, and then you kind of have to work with the metal. And that's not a big deal if you're set up with a soldering station and everything, but if you're not, then you're kind of screwed. And then, sorry, the other thing I wanted to mention is, notice I haven't filed anything off the bottom. I specifically left this spot thick because I knew that I was going to have to resize this a little bit. Now there are proper tools for doing this, like ring sizing. It's called it's a reamer. It looks almost identical to this, except it's got like a hollow spot with a blade, and they're generally made out of wood. And you just put it in and turn it, and it slices away a little bit until it's the right size. But again, I don't have those I'm not going to include those in the kit because they're like $45, and you need it for all of, I don't know, like a minute between all 4 of the projects that would be in this course. So I'm just not including it, although again, it will be on the list of possible things to buy if you want to get into this more seriously. Alright, I can go a little bit harder with this wax. This is at about 5.5 now. I know I need to get another full size. I'm counting every stroke. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm overlapping as I turn so that, again, I don't create anything odd shaped. And I can check to see if I have an odd shape by looking down and seeing if there's any light coming around here. I've got a little bit, but it's not too bad. Oh, I never even checked what I was. What was that? I'm at a 6. A little bit more. Whoops, my bad. I think I'm going to switch over to the fine side now because I want to start to smooth the inside. Oops. Where are we at? There we go, 6.5. And very little bit of light coming out the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. Anyway, no biggie. All right, so that's going to be what we'll work with. So this is tapered. It's the right ring size. Now I can start to cut away at the bottom and make this very chunky part a little bit more usable. Not get it stuck on my finger. I think, however, we're going to choose a letter now. Does anyone have any suggestions? I'm open to any letter here. It's only 26. No one in the chat, that's cool. Let's see what size, actually. Pull this up to the light. Okay, so we can pick from any one of this size, and that should be pretty good. Let's do an R, because R looks like fun. Obviously, some of these letters will be a lot easier than others. Like, I just picked this font at random, whatever was in Pages. So I knew they were straight. They're not like serif with little curls on the ends. It's not cursive, obviously. Like, you can do as much as you want creatively. But I wanted to pick something I knew I could do in a 1-hour stream. So I'm going to trim this paper as close as I can without going over. A little bit of packing tape, clear packing tape. If I can find the end, I think that's it right there. Don't need a lot. I'm going to trim most of this away. Okay. So I've got the R. And we're going to just try to put that in the middle. Just like that. I think that's, no, could go a little bit to the left. Yep, there we go, that's good. So I'll trim off most of this because we don't need it. Okay. I think I'm going to tuck these edges down just so there's very little chance of it shifting at all. There we go. And now I need a sharp tool. A pin would work if I had one, but I don't. So I'm going to use, these are not included in the thing, these are just a burr. It's a very sharp, pointy object. It does not matter what kind of pointy, sharp object you use, as long as it's relatively strong. So what I'm going to do now is just poke through the paper into the wax all the way around the R. Just around the outside of the R. I actually want to size this up just a little bit, just judging by the size of the ring in general. very fine, finicky work like this. Those of you who need glasses for close-up stuff, you might need a set of this. This is it's called an optivisor. I think this one's 3 times zoom. So you just wear it on your head and you can look really closely. For most, you know, stoneworking jewelry stuff, you need like a proper microscope, which we don't have, and I mean this is a bit much for that. But anyway, again, I won't be including an optivisor in the kit. They're too expensive. And you only need it for like this one thing. Okay. So it's not too bad. Before I pull it all the way up, I just want to check it, make sure it looks good. Doesn't look too bad. Oh, I think it is actually a little off center. Oh well. We can correct that a little bit. We'll just push one side. I mean, a ring is pretty variable. We'll just file it off a little bit like that. Okay. So, now what? Well, I think I'm going to use the jeweler's saw again. And coming in from where the R starts approximately, I'm going to try and cut all the way back, just trim off this corner on both sides, and then we'll start to carve out the actual R itself. Now this is where a bench pin would be really handy. Yeah, you know what? We're including a bench pin in the kit now. Not even a question. You need it anyway, even if you're going to get into this seriously, you need a bench pin. Let me just shift the camera a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So this is a bench pin. This one has a built-in anvil, so you can hammer on it. The actual wood itself is replaceable. You can see mine's got little drill marks all over it, and it's customized in certain ways. So it's not uncommon for most jewelers to have, I would say, well, they probably almost always just use the one. I like to just use one, but I've seen others where you've got like a little hook for cutting ring shanks, like a little cradle, like this, so that it doesn't slip. I've seen ones with like a V here and then a micro V there, just for doing fine detail. On mine, I've got like a little thing here. This is, I carved out a little reservoir and filled it with beeswax, so that when I'm cutting metal, I can just slide it in and that acts as a lubricant. In this case, that's not going to do anything, but anyway, yeah, there's lots of ways to customize these things. And this little tray up here is actually for stones. So you put them in and they can't roll away. There we go. That's so much easier. That's what we've got so far. And I still can see the R. We're going to start working with that next. Hi, thanks. Sorry, I'm kind of not looking at the chat too much at the moment. Kind of busy. I do actually have, sorry, addressing the clog of my file, I do actually have like a stiff brush for getting rid of all this stuff a lot faster, but I'm just using that sharp burr I had and just cleaning it out a little bit because it was not doing anything. it's always best to work against something. In my case, I went to college for this, so I had formal teachers and stuff, but they all came from that previous generation that generally did apprenticeship when that was still a thing. So they would tell like, oh, when I started, I was filing like this up in the air, and they got so mad at me, and they all have like a weird saying or something. Each one's different. But you should always brace yourself against something so that you stay as stable as possible. So what I'm doing is paying special attention to where the R is. Let me bring this in a little bit, maybe. There we go. It looks better. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay on my camera, so I can't. There we go. It's not bad. So I'm paying special attention to that R, that flat side of the R, making sure that the file line that I bring up is actually flat and in line with the R. That's my new reference point. And I'm just bringing in the sides of this chunk. This is still very, very, very thick. If I had to guess, I'd say probably 3.5 millimeters, maybe 3. And in jewelry terms, that's like massive. There's lots of material we can get rid of here. And always check periodically to make sure that you're still flat when you're working. Because like if you're right-handed or left-handed, you tend to things tend to sway, if that makes any sense. That's more of like a steel, like a hammer working thing. You'll notice like if you raise a dish or something, it'll move to the right or move to the left depending on which hand you have. It's very, very, very rare, or it's something that does not come naturally to hammer perfectly down, and that creates a sway. And the same with filing. Like if as a right-handed person, I will tend to sway to one side, and then if you've ever done like, if you ever found like a childhood drawing, where you look at something and then you flip it over, and it's so clearly, like it just looks off, completely off when you flip it around. That's what you want to avoid with something like this specifically. Not bad. So that side looks pretty good. This side. Now I'm going to work on that side. We're just going to work one step, then the other, and keep going from there. I really do wish I knew where my brush was. I think it has a lot to do with the temperature at the moment. Like it's pretty comfortable in here at the moment. But I mean, compared to a Canadian winter, it's pretty warm. So I think the wax is getting a little bit more gummy than usual, but that's fine. We do have air conditioning in here, but it's not always always on. This is something I'm going to mention more in the specific tutorial videos that go with the course. Some of the filing technique. I'll just zoom out a little bit and I'll show you what I mean, if that will work. There we go. Okay, so what I did there in that last motion was more of a gross motor movement, which means that I was using most of my body or my arm, not just, you know, pecking away at it. If you do a larger movement, it tends to be, especially with curves, it tends to be a smoother curve. Of course it takes practice, but so that just helps round everything over quite nicely. Zoom that back in so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. Alright, so we've taken off all those curves, or all those sharp corners rather, not curves, and this is where we're at. So it's not symmetrical or anything at the moment, but it will be when we get done with it. I think one of the things I like the most about working with wax is that it moves so much more easily than metal, especially just with hand tools. Obviously, like if you have a belt sander, anything will move quickly. But moreover is it's very fixable. So if I like turn and jab this sharp edge in there and make a big gouge, it's like, oh no. With metal, so what do? You either laser weld it back or PUK weld it back or solder it or something, or you know, whatever. It's just a whole bunch of hassle. With this, I can just grab like some of this dust, melt it, put it back on, and then it's fixed. It's nice. And of course, you know, relatively speaking, if I was making this ring for someone and they wanted it in like platinum or something, then the overall cost of platinum is massive. Like, you know, you can't, it's hard to justify holding something like that in stock. But I could make, you know, a whole alphabet of these rings in wax, be ready for it to go into platinum, and the wax doesn't cost me a fraction of what the other stuff does. And it's not like the wax has an expiration date or anything, so you can just carve to your heart's delight with very little overhead aside from the tools. And it's not impossible at all for you to make a piece that, if you cast it in, you know, 14 karat gold or something, could pay back everything tenfold. That's one of the appeals of casting for me, as well as, you know, the sculptural aspect. Being able to melt wax and get textures that aren't always possible with metal. Alright, so I think I'm going to stop worrying about the actual shank and start getting into the thing that is most interesting. Okay. So the next tool we're going to use to start cutting out this R are these tools here from Guess When. It's a 4-pack. They're double-ended. They kind of look like dental tools, and I think maybe they were made by the same manufacturer, but they're hollow-ended. So there's a square, and on the other side is a larger square, and they're all bladed. Like, it's not a super sharp blade or anything, but they're hollow, they're bladed, and you can push carve. You can push carve with them. With the square specifically, with the triangle one, then there's a round and a pointed teardrop one. And they all have their purpose. In this case, we're going to start with, I think, the triangle one. The triangle one will produce the same cut as the square, except the triangle has these little, you know, the triangle, the point. So it's a little bit easier to get around corners and to get my finger right up close to it, so I don't so I can steady myself when I go to cut. In some cases, like, this is something that's kind of hard to demonstrate because I'm going to be so up close, and especially if you do this in the course, everyone's going to kind of have to figure this part out for themselves. In my case, you can see I'm kind of putting it on the bench pin like that. And that's giving me as stable a surface as possible while I carve this out very slowly, just one little shaving at a time. And like I said before, if I mess any part of this up, I know that I can just melt some wax back in and fix it, which will be very handy. No one's perfect, and as I said before, I don't do this all that much anymore. So I'm going to focus on doing the outline, following all those dots. Because this is a straight tool, I can go back on any straight line that I cut that might have wavered, and I'm just kind of digging and pulling, and that's just taking a tiny sliver away and cleaning up that edge. Then I'm going back and cleaning it up. And the other thing I'm going to do actually is start to file in a little bit and start to, actually shape the ring to fit the R. So there's going to be, let's see if I can show you this. So the R comes down that little hump and then down. I'm going to take this right here and push that in a pretty deep crease, and that's going to remove quite a bit of material, which will make the ring lighter. It'll also add a lot more design and pop. So in theory, you should be able to wear this and into hot wax, which is what a signet ring was for originally, I think. Don't quote me on that, about history. So just with the file, taking a risk on the rough edge there. I'm going to use the fine edge. I'll line it up with that crease. And push. Slow and steady with this. I keep saying you can fix your stuff, but if you just do it right the first time, you save heaps of time. And you learn. It's just nice to always have that safety net. There we go. So I just brought it close. It's not quite where I want it to be, but now there's like that deep channel, and now so I was working on one side, and I'm gonna work on this side and start to curve that around to contour the R. This would be much simpler with a letter that only has straight lines, but we didn't pick one of those, so it doesn't really matter. Something else to note that there's a very specific reason why I picked this file. There's another kind of file here. I've been very on the fence about these. These files are specifically for wax. The teeth are like just jagged and crazy. These ones don't have any like corner cutting power. Like this one, the teeth come all the way to the edge, so I can get a nice crease. This one's just for hogging material off. So I've been kind of on the fence between including one of these and this set. Now, obviously you get more with this, but this file is just the most infinitely useful file. So for this kit purposes, I think this is the one I'm sold with, but we'll see. It might be one of those. Might be the wrong choice. So I don't know. I wish I could have music on in a stream. Can you do that? Normally I've got like loud EDM blaring in the background. Whoops, I made a boo-boo. Went too far. That's okay. I'll be able to file that back because I actually kind of undershot it. We'll be able to make this work, no problem. Just cleaning up the contour here, and I think I'm going to file this closer. There we go, so I've met the line. Now I'm keeping everything flat and on the same plane. Not bad, not bad. Now one of the real challenges we're going to have with this is that middle part of the R. Because obviously with the saw, what we could do is we could kind of bore a little hole through that and use the saw, clean it up. But the trouble is that we've got this part of the shank here at the bottom, so we're not going to be able to get in there very easily. I know this looks really rough right now, but we are going to make this work. With the nice thing about these tools is if you just drag with them, you pretty much tear off any of the file marks. And specifically with this triangle one, I can get right into that crease and make it nice and clean. So I think what we will do on the bottom of this R, I know that I kind of kiboshed the top there, or messed it up there. We'll bring that in a bit. The bottom of the R, I think, is just going to be a wedge that will cut away, because there's no point in really holding onto that piece. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that with the saw. And that's going to work because of that taper we did on the bottom. There we go. Not bad. Again, we'll have to clean it up. I tried to stay away from those, what am I trying to say? Tried to stay away from those lines that we marked with the pin. Just getting in there. Alright, that's not bad. Does need a little bit more on the top here, and we still have to deal with that somehow. How am I going to do that? You just think of it like a little D, I suppose. Treat it like its own thing. Just going to use the file very lightly on the top because we've got pretty much everything marked in deeply. I just want to make sure that it's flat. Actually, we should make sure relative to everything else it's flat. There we go. So this is going to come back a little bit. Remember at the beginning of putting this R on, I said we needed to make it centered, and then I proceeded to not make it center. So what happened is the R was a little bit slanted, like that, and then what we're going to do is just file that slant back, and that'll make it more centered. And I am messing up this straight line a little bit, but that's no problem. We'll just come back in. Sorry, I get quiet when I'm concentrating. So bad. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I think, this still needs quite a bit more work in the R, just to clean up some of these lines. But I think I'm going to start to extend this down and around and start to make this more of the final shape. After that it would just be, you know, little detail work, and I think this stream has gone on long enough, so I'm going to push that out through there, just so we have something to show for at least, very end of this. And then the rest would just be little fine detail work. Something to note actually is, as great as wax is, sometimes it's just too soft to do all the little things that you might want to do. So sometimes it's best to just wait till it's in metal, because with the metal you can just file like a little bit and that's all you needed. But with wax it's like a little bit is like one tooth or something, you know what I mean? It's hard to describe. It's one of those situations where you know you're in it from experience when you've been in it before. And yeah, unfortunately that's not something that's extremely teachable. That just comes from doing this. Although I will try to identify as many of those moments as I possibly can when I do all the videos. Sorry. What I'm going to do on the inside of this band, I'm going to use the half round side of the file and file the corner off. And what that does is creates a nice little bevel in there, which is comfortable to wear, so you don't have your hand dig into anything, or your dig into there when you clench your hand closed. And I believe they call that comfort fit, although that might be trademarked, so maybe I didn't use that term properly, and I think it might actually mostly apply to like wedding rings and stuff. But anyway, we're going to make this more comfortable to wear. And I'm also going to file down the top up here. Doesn't seem too bad. A little bit more on the bottom. This is all very fine, finicky work. Like if you want to do this coarse, or even just do this on your own, this bottom part, any aspect of this is mostly arbitrary. Like beyond this point, it's just going to be making it comfortable and proportional, things like that. If you don't want them to be, if you wanted like a little brick for a ring, then that's cool. Why not? I've seen a lot of, I think the proper word is avant-garde jewelry. Not all of it that I like, but some of them embrace that, like leaving file lines or adding textures that you wouldn't normally see, or just literally like casting a brick. I don't I haven't seen that yet, but pretty close. Now there is a minimum amount that you want to go for this, the bottom of the shank. Obviously if it's too thin, it'll be brittle and break, or it'll bend and break, more likely, depending on what metal you're using. And the other thing too is when I go to sprue this up, this pink wax here, this is called sprue rod, and what I do is I'll melt the end and attach that to here. If there was more up, and that what this is going to do is allow me to attach it to a tree, another piece. I think I actually have one around here somewhere. Let me just zoom the camera out. Where did I put it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this would be like the central sprue rod that everything gets attached to, and you put like models all the way around, and you build it up using this stuff to attach it. This, one of the rules is never to go from go from thin to thick. Because what you're doing is you're trying to funnel molten metal that's trying to harden. Every millisecond that goes by is too much. It's cooling down. So if you go thin to thick, it will be less likely to have the chance to get all the way around and fill this entire model. To help that along, I have thinner sprue rods, and what I could do is put one right in the middle, like that, going from the top to the bottom, and then have that one there. And what this does is it allows the metal to go straight as well as to the sides, and make sure it's filled every part of the cavity. You mostly want to do that with really dainty stone settings, like if you've got massive diamond or something, but only 1 millimeter prongs holding it up, then that's a good choice to go through. Sometimes you can even like do multiple and guide it to where exactly where you want it to go. And then because this is round on the inside, you just use your jeweler's saw when it's cast, and you just cut it all the way, and then you have a ring, and you just file it, and it's gone. Anyway. So I'm not going to round it nearly as much up on the top. I just want to round it enough so that it's comfortable, but it doesn't start to sink, like it doesn't encroach onto the design. Just had a thought that would be kind of fun if you were to do a combination of these two techniques. Or sorry, I haven't mentioned the second technique yet. If you do a combination of two techniques where you build up, you can carve out the ring shank, the actual part that we're carving. Sorry, I realized I didn't zoom back in. If you want to carve this out the way we've done it, and then using all this wax dust that we've collected, you could melt it, and you could build it back up, but you could do like a cursive thing and make it really really ornate, something that you wouldn't want to carve necessarily. I'm trying to think of like, if you did like a really ornate letter with really like big swirls and stuff, you could just build that up rather than carve it out. little technique that we can do near the end of this, probably closer to casting actually, where you can, it's a chemical that you can wash over the wax, and what it does is it instantly smooths it. It basically like melts the wax chemically, turning it into a liquid, and then because the fluid is so, I don't really know what the word is for that, but it's light, it evaporates quickly. It's like an alcohol base, I think. And then it just leaves it evaporates almost instantly and leaves the surface like glass. So we can skip most of the sanding. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this fluid is. It's very common. You can get it for pennies at most hardware stores. Maybe I'll do a little demo of that right about now, actually. Let me just clean up all these little lines, and then we will use that fluid to smooth it all out. Now I'm not finished yet. Just for the sake of the stream, though, I want to get this rolling and get a finished product. So, like I said, I'm not super happy with the middle of the R yet. I'm going to go back and tweak that a little bit, but I think the stream's gone on long enough. So let me get that fluid for you. Everyone knows this fluid as lighter fluid. So what we can do is we'll just pop this open. Let me get a rag. Q-tips work really well for this, but I don't have any on hand. Anyway, so we'll just put a dab of that on the cloth, and we'll wipe the surface with a lighter fluid. I think I need a little bit more on that. Obviously be very careful with this. Don't put it down like next to your torch or anything. So anyway, you can see I'm rubbing this, and it's smoothing out the surface very nicely. And this is just getting it prepped for casting. One of the rules with casting, especially with waxes, is what you put in is what you get out. So if the piece is rough with lots of file lines, guess what you're going to get back? Lots of cleanup in the silver or gold or whatever it is, whatever metal you're casting. That's why you want your models to be as flawless, your wax models to be as flawless as possible. So that's the one side, a little bit better, and that's the rough side. It's still, actually this is the smooth side, because we didn't really have to do a whole lot of filing on that. It's not a great comparison. The other thing you can do is some 600 grit sandpaper. That works really well. But if you're doing a piece that's got like tons of little prongs and settings and stuff, then maybe it's not the best, because you simply can't get in, and wax being as soft as it is could just break. So going the chemical route might be the best option. There we go. So I didn't have to sand this at all. I just used the end of the file here, the vulcanite file here that had the nice fine teeth. And then I just used lighter fluid with a rag, an old t-shirt actually, nothing special. It's not microfiber or anything crazy like that. It just wipes on, and there's a little bit of filing down here that was a little bit heavier left over from the coarse side, but nothing too bad. I can go back in with that file and clean it up. But I think we're going to call it here because we've been streaming long enough. I am definitely going to keep working on this and clean up the middle of that R. Not Super pleased with how that looks at the moment. Very, very rough, and I still have to clean up the outside. But there's the rough idea. Cast in silver, pretty hefty little piece. The other thing too that you can do to make this a little bit more lightweight, if that was your goal, would be to hollow out the inside using a round burr. I think I've actually got one right here. Using a round burr like this on like a Dremel or a flex shaft. Again, not part of the course, but if you were to get into jewelry, then that's something to consider. Saving metal is a big deal. So you can kind of go on the inside and carve all that out and make it hollow on the inside, which then actually helps your finger breathe a little bit as well. So anyway, there we go. So that's the ring. This is going to be the first project for our casting course when we get that live. All of this wax that we have down here, not sure if you can see this. All of this wax we're going to save, and we'll use that in a future project for additive wax, where we will use the spatula and the lamp, and we'll dip into this and we'll build something up. So anyway, that was fun. This has actually been my first stream ever. Whoop, that's too zoomed in. There we go. So this has been my first stream ever. We're going to do more. We're going to make more videos, more content, now that we're a bit more set up in our space. So thanks for watching, everybody that came. If there's any questions, feel free to shoot me comments, emails, Instagram, whatever is best for you. I'm always checking that stuff. So it was good having you guys, and thanks for watching.